Hi, this is Peter, and this is Nha Trang, Vietnam, the Anna Marina before the pontoons were installed. This is the Nautic Solutions fleet of charter yachts arrived from Croatia, mostly Nautic Cats, but including one Lagoon catamaran. They arrived safely after being shipped to Singapore and then sailed up from Singapore. So they were safely ensconced there, and a visiting yacht race from Hong Kong arrived, and there were 3 yachts remaining from that yacht race when disaster struck. So here we are in Nha Trang in the Anna Marina, which was the scene of the 2017 typhoon Damphry. Now during that typhoon, several yachts were sunk, and most of them have been now recovered, and there's only 2 actual victims out of it. The Beneteau, which was broke up when it was lifted out, and Cameroon, the 525 Nautic Cat, which is sitting in Camaran Bay in a shed. I think it's on its final resting place. Now when the typhoon hit, these pontoons weren't here, it was under construction. There was a visiting fleet of racing yachts, those that were remaining after the race, and the result was quite spectacular. So I'll show you some video of the storm. A few people have been interested in us coming back here. Last night we had a meeting or session with 3 of the people that were actually here on the night of the typhoon. So it's an interesting bit of history, and we'll explore it some more. This is the Russian crew of the Russian yacht No Applause, trying to minimise the amount of damage by putting fenders in. They abandoned the attempt when winds exceeded 60 kilometres per hour. They apparently reached 80 kilometres per hour, or 90 later in the storm. The storm originally came in from the left-hand side, which is the east. Then there was a lull, and then it came back from the west, and this pushed the yachts onto the concrete walkway. So this is some film taken by one of the Russians, safely ensconced in the clubhouse, focusing on their yacht. But there's another half a dozen yachts behind that you can't see. So this was the day after, and that's No Applause, the Russian yacht. So she survived, had insurance repairs done in Hong Kong later. This is the Beneteau 50 Shalala. She sunk and broke up on recovery. That's Josephina, the Nautic Cat 441. That's Gawler 1, the Nautic Cat 515, later to become Eastwind. And that's damage to the port side there, and to the bow section with the pulpit wiped off. Now this is Whiskey Jack, and she was repaired on site. They took her ashore and repaired her, and she went on to win the 2023 Hong Kong to Subic Bay China Sea race. Fantastic. This is Nymph. That was the last vessel to be sold, and she left for Finland in 2023 June. This is Cameroon, the Nautic Cat 525, which was sunk and is still in the shed and that's Barbuka, the 525 that a Canadian gentleman bought and was sailing her home via the inland sea of Japan. And on the end there, the Lagoon 50, she disappeared, and we can't. Apparently, it's the subject of a court case, so we can't really say what we know about that. But she did disappear, and the Lagoon 50 that appeared later is a different boat. So this is Gawler, as she was then, in the shed after 5 years. And when I was there saving Josephina, I had a good look at her. And I sort of fell for her. I thought it had to be saved. Quite a few people had come to look at her, I believe, over the years. And the main thing was to ascertain the integrity of the hull. And as far as I could ascertain, it was absolutely perfect. The damage that was done to the bow had been professionally repaired by a gang of European fiberglass experts that were brought out to do that. And it was an excellent job both inside and outside the hull. So it's got a fully encapsulated lead keel with 8 tonne of lead in there, and it's got a skeeg hung rudder, so it's all well protected compared to the modern yachts. It's now this is in the shed next door. We went and had a look at the mast, and well, it's a mess. There was a fire in the shed and the masts were damaged and repaired locally with this stainless steel sleeve that was fitted. Anyway, it did the job as far as we were concerned, because one of the conditions that the Vietnamese authorities put on anybody buying these yachts, they had to leave in the same condition as what they arrived in, so fully rigged sailing boats. So we had to repair this mast. I was out of my depth as far as repairing that mast was concerned, so I enlisted the aid of Simon Pickering. He was a surveyor who I commissioned. He came over and surveyed the yacht for insurance purposes, and he advised on the repairs to the mast, and he sent over one of his guys, a yachtsman and rigger who goes by the name of Kimpy, and he got to work on repairing and re-rigging the mast. And this was the first stage of cleaning mast and boom, and he did a great job. He knew exactly what to do and how to go about it, and he was very innovative in areas of making repairs and giving us a viable mast. Whether we used it or sailed it or not was irrelevant, as long as it at this stage, as long as it was in position. So we got 5 or 6 guys to move it onto its back. It's quite heavy because it is an internal furling mast, in-mast furling, which we won't be using because it's all gummed up for that fire. And we don't have a set of sails for it. But I did start making inquiries, and I found a set of sails in Nha Trang. So we went to this guy's home north of Nha Trang, and he dragged these sails out of the back shed, and they'd been recovered from the floor of of the marina. They even had barnacles on them, so they'd been on the bottom for at least 2 weeks, I'd say, as a minimum, maybe a month, and they were carbon fibre sails. And once we got them spread out, Simon identified from the sail number that they're actually off Shalala, the Beneteau 50. And here they are now. And Kempy had to repair them. We had holes in them, so I managed to track down some material, like vinyl type material. He made patches, contact adhesive on each side, and did a fantastic job of repairing these sails and giving us a viable sailing solution. He actually rigged the mainsail so it would slide up the inside of the furling slot. So it was quite clever, really. They only reach about 3/4 of the way up the mast. Ours was a far bigger rig. So we had to get them to put the scaffolding back around the bow to replace an important component on the bow that's missing in this image, and that's the steel that goes on the stem. It's actually the chain plate for the forestay. But I call it the stem head fitting because I don't know the proper name. Now I had to get that repaired. Stainless steel crowd in Cheng polished it and repaired it. Left a few dents in it, which is good because that shows what she's been through. She's entitled to a few dents. It's fastened using these bolts and these backing plates. And that hole in the top there is where the forestay goes, and that tang off where the rope's tied, the string is where the platform on top of the bowsprit bolts on. So inside there were 4 holes in the hull from where it was removed, and we had to drill the other 4 holes, and then he fitted it using the 3M 5200 on the inside and the outside. He taped it all up and masked it, and did a fantastic job. Very happy with that. Very strong. So back in the chain locker, and there it is all fitted, and 5200 well and truly secured in place. And they're locking nuts. If anybody's interested, they have a nylon insert in them. So meanwhile, the diesel guy's been working on the engine, and he's got it going okay. Has identified some parts that need replacing. We couldn't get them locally, so we had a visa run to Singapore, and that's when we bought the all those relays for temperature and sender units for oil temperature, and the starter relay and oil. And also that's where we bought the 3M 5200 because we couldn't buy it in Vietnam. So it ended up being a very handy trip. We also bought the new Windex for the mast, so we had a wind indication and direction fitted. So this was an exciting time. We actually got to move her out onto the fairway so we could step the mast. So that's the 525 Cameroon on the hard there. She's basically a bare hull. The rig is still in the shed. I can't see anybody saving her. It's sad, but I'd love to see it saved, but it's beyond me. It's too big a project for me. I think that's probably the only time you'll ever see a 515 being lifted over a 525. They're definitely different underwater lines. The 515 is an S&S hull, which was originally supplied to Nauta Swan and was a Swan 50. And then they sold the mould to Nauticat, who Kaj Gustafsson designed a pilot house deck and interior to suit it. And I think it's a magnificent combination. It just works so well. I can testify to the fact that she motors and sails beautifully, and we will be putting a feathering prop on her, which might even give us an extra knot or so. So they lift her onto this steel platform and they chock it up and tie it down. And this platform is then taken down the slipway, which is on the far distance there in that last shot. These guys do a great job. They take great care, and I can't fault what they do. It's an old-fashioned, true and tested in time method of chocking up a boat, but it works well. When they launch it, they have a diver in the water to make sure they recover all this timber. So this whole platform is lifted up with the crane, and it goes down to the slipway, and on the slipway there's a bogie, like a railway bogie with wheels on rails, and they lower it onto that bogie. And then came time to step the mast. I very carefully guided it through the boot, which is a waterproof fitting to secure it to the deck. And then they fitted the forestay, which has got the electric furler on it. And that's the mast step to the keel, showing all the wiring coming out. And there she is, fully rigged for the first time in, apart from the boom, which is sitting on deck. First time in 5 or 6 years. So they lowered her into the water. Just another couple of metres to go. There she is afloat. You can almost hear the sigh of relief. Back where she belongs. Now that bubbling in the water there, that's the diver. That's the air hose. And they don't use scuba. It's just a hose with air coming out of it, floating in the water. And when he wants some air, he just grabs it and puts it in his mouth and wolfs it down. Seems to work. So they don't use the motor at all. They pull it over to the pontoon using these ropes. And that's their way of doing it. And then when it's secured to the pontoon, they hand it over. So there we were in the water. So we had a couple of days to check all the systems before we commenced our sea trial, which is recommended by the surveyor, and is also a component of the insurance approval. So we motored out through Cam-Ranh Bay. It's hard to convey what a great feeling this is, to leave Cam-Ranh Bay. It's just a great place to leave. And as we went our way out through the fish farms and contemplate what we've achieved, it's quite a great feeling. So it's a bit of a zigzag out through here. But actually we had a boat pull out in front of us, and I was then able to follow him. But I'd done it a year previously, and I knew the path to take. So when we get out through these fish farms, there is a shipping channel, and we are told we are not allowed to enter the shipping channel. So we exit the bay just on the northern side of the shipping channel. So that peninsula on the left is the northern arm of the entrance to the bay. Now that contains a Coast Guard base. There's usually 2 or 3 fisheries patrol type white Coast Guard vessels moored there, and then there's a naval base which has half a dozen ships moored there, and 3 submarines when we went past. On this particular day, Navy were doing exercises off the coast. And when we left, there was actually 5 of them at the entrance of the bay. It took an hour to get out there, and by the time we got there, they were gone to the horizon. But there were live firing exercises that day, and it was coming over the VHF. But we checked the coordinates, and it was well away from our area. We didn't see any shell splashes or missiles. But of course, we were amongst the fishing fleet a lot of the time, so I think we're pretty safe in close. Just getting out of these fish farms now. This is coming up to the end of it. And then we dipped the ensign to the Coast Guard. They stopped and gave us a salute as we went past, and gave us a wave and wished us well. So I went down below to check on how we're going. That's the chart there which shows us rounding the peninsula. And the red diamond is where we actually are. The purple is what we want to do, but we're going around fishing vessels and various marker buoys and things. We're trying to avoid all their fishing nets. 42 degrees bearing and 5.3 knots. At this stage we're doing about 1,500 revs. We've checked all the instruments. 2 full tanks of diesel, 1,600 litres of diesel there. Temperature's fine, revs, amperage, oil pressure, all good. But I did notice a knocking noise coming from the power train, and I knocked the revs down to about 1,200, and the noise went away. We were still doing 4 4.3 knots. So I knew there was a problem there, which we'd have to address in Nha Trang. But that's what sea trials are for. I'd rather find out now than out the middle of the South China Sea. So coming into this took about 3 hours into Nha Trang Bay, and that's one of the ferries that commutes between Nha Trang and the Vin Pearl, which is a resort island just offshore. This is the chairlift that goes across. It's actually disassembled at the moment for repairs. It's been like that for a few years now. It was operating quite busily about 5 years ago. I've got friends that have been on it. Don't know what the problem was, but there's a large Ferris wheel on Vin Pearl and plenty of resorts. So coming into Anna Marina now, they sent out a rib for us to follow in. There's a bit of a convoluted passage to follow, but it's there's two big buoys there that you go between, and then you follow the coast in. So there's a pontoon across the entrance. Now apparently in winter there's a southerly swell comes up the bay. Wasn't taken into account when it was designed, and they've put that in to minimise that swell. But the facilities are absolutely first class. This is a beautifully built and maintained marina. It's had very little use. It's only just been reopened to internationally registered yachts, following several months or even years, I think, of appeals to the government in Hanoi to allow these yachts. Now, we believe we're the second yacht, so this is Sean and Oscar, who dived down and refitted the cutlass bearing to the stern gland for me. Refastened it with a hose clip on the shaft and also tightened the grub screw. Thanks, fellas. Without you, we would have been in deep, with the ultimate problem of having to return to Cam Ranh to be slipped, and I didn't want to do that. So a couple of days there preparing the sails. Weather was good. We proceeded to leave for the Philippines. It's a 680 nautical mile trip, and here it is. We've got a fishing fleet on the horizon there. I'm just tickling the autopilot. There's a gap about 100 metres. We've gone right through the middle of that gap safely and out to sea. So 12 o'clock the next day, our noon sighting, we'd done 158 nautical miles. We had a hell of a storm the first night, a force 7 on the Beaufort. That's 30 knot winds and 4 metre waves, the occasional 5 metre swell coming through. But the further we crossed, the calmer it became. There's still quite a big swell coming through there, which doesn't show too well on the camera. But not enough breeze for sailing, so we just kept on motoring along. And we passed over 4,000 metres, 5,000 metres of deep water, and safely arrived into Subic, 96 hours to Grande Island. There's US Navy's in port there, which is quite common in Subic. 2 fleet oilers in for probably R&R, some repairs. It's hard to know. They're always busy. There's a patrol always moored off the boat you can't approach. And then safely into the Subic Yacht Bay Marina, Yacht Basin. Calm and secure, where we commenced work on doing some repairs. A much needed inverter charger That's Fred, our electrician. Got some polish on the hull, brought up that beautiful navy blue shine, and started restoring the deck, which was a long, involved process. The next mission is to relocate from Subic Bay down to Cebu, which we'll do in August, and in Cebu we'll make the decision whether to sail to Australia via the north coast of New Guinea or through Indonesia and Torres Straits. Thank you for watching.